At 3 in the morning, in a Brooklyn apartment, a phone screen plays a 60-second loop of an elderly Korean woman folding mandu. Her hands move quickly, the dough is pinched in a single twist, the filling drops in at the same moment the lower edge is brought up, the camera holds tight on her fingers. There is no voiceover and no recipe in the caption. The clip ends, restarts, ends, restarts. By the fifth pass, the watcher has the hand shape. The next afternoon, they buy dumpling wrappers, fold 30 mandu badly, eat them anyway, and folder the video under saved for next month's second attempt. The cookbook on the same counter, the one a relative gave them 2 Christmases ago, has been opened twice. The video in 5 minutes taught something the cookbook never quite managed: the feeling of the fold. What it did not teach is what to do when the wrapper splits, what filling to wrapper ratio holds water, why the dough sticks more on humid days, or where mandu sits inside the larger Korean kitchen. Some of that lives in the comment section. Some of it is not yet anywhere on the watcher's screen. This essay is about that exchange, what the medium gained, what it left for some other layer to provide, and how home cooks are quietly rebuilding the structure inside the new medium without giving up the discovery that made it interesting in the first place. The apprenticeship that always existed. Cooking has been learned by watching hands for as long as cooking has been taught. The Edo period sushi apprentice spent the first 3 years on rice. The Italian Nana and her granddaughter at the kitchen counter, the Senegalese mother and her daughter at the Thibaut Dien pot, the Cantonese Sifu and his trainee at the wok station. All of these are apprenticeships in which the eye and the hand learn together, with the spoken word doing supporting work rather than primary work. The cookbook as a teaching medium is the historical outlier here, not the algorithmic video. A printed recipe is a relatively recent invention, codified in its modern form during the 19th century, and even then, it carried the assumption that the reader already knew most of what the recipe did not say. What changed across the 20th century was the share of cooking knowledge transmitted by text. As households moved out of multi-generational arrangements, and as the food magazine and cookbook industries grew, the printed recipe became, for many cooks in many places, the primary point of contact with a dish they had not been taught by hand. That period was about a century long. It was not the natural state of cooking education. It was a particular historical moment in which the printed page carried a load it was never quite shaped for. What algorithmic video is doing, at planetary scale, is restoring the seeing the hands layer to the dominant position it held for most of cooking history. The medium is new, the underlying pedagogy is older than text. What is unprecedented is the algorithm. The seeing the hands part is the return of an old default. What video taught better than text? Set aside for a moment the question of what algorithmic video has cost. It could not have spread the way it has if it did not in real and specific ways teach things text could not. Knife angle, for one. A cookbook can describe the relationship between a Japanese gyuto and a chopping board as 20 degrees off vertical, with the heel of the blade riding through the cut and the tip held lightly down. The home cook reading that sentence has to translate it into hand and wrist geometry, alone, without a feedback loop. A video of the same cut, viewed 3 times, replaces the translation step with direct imitation. The wrist understands what the page asked it to imagine. Dough hydration is another. Text can specify 75% hydration for a sourdough. Only video shows what 75% hydration looks like when a stretch and fold tugs it across the bowl. What tension feels like at the surface. When to stop folding, because the dough has become slack and shiny rather than tight and tacky. A 2-minute video of a competent hand working a wet dough makes the language visible in a way that words never quite cracked. Doneness signals are a third category. Pan-frying fish, when to flip, has historically been taught by watching the edge of the fillet turn opaque about 3/4 of the way up the side. A printed recipe can name that signal. A video shows the color shift in real time. The same applies to egg whites at soft peak, custard at nappage, caramel just before the burn, gluten at the window pane stage. Regional authenticity is a fourth and possibly the most consequential. A home cook in Iowa, learning about Sichuan cooking from a 1985 cookbook, was reading a translation through a translator, with whatever ingredient substitutions the editor thought necessary. The same home cook today can watch native Sichuan cooks working with ingredients available in Chengdu, rather than the editor's approximation, using the actual pan motion and the actual chili bean ratio. The information loss between source and kitchen has dropped dramatically. A Korean grandmother's anchovy stock, a Hyderabadi dum biryani, a Senegalese yassa, All are now within reach of a cook in a city the originating cuisine has never visited. These gains are operational, not rhetorical. A home cook today with a phone has access to a richer visual vocabulary of cooking technique than any home cook in any previous century. The rest of this essay only makes sense if that fact is held alongside whatever else it is about to say. What video flattened the losses, like the gains, are best read as specific rather than general. 3 of them are worth naming. The first is structure. A cookbook, even a mediocre one, comes with a chapter order. Soups before sauces, sauces before braises, braises before pastry, or whatever order the author chose. The order is a curriculum, however informal. Algorithmic video offers no map. The feed is a stream of individual techniques in whatever sequence the algorithm has decided to serve them. And the watcher's sense of where any one technique sits in the larger order of cooking is built, or not built, entirely by the watcher. 2,000 short videos can be watched without producing a structure. A single chapter of a thoughtful book usually produces one. The second is sequence. Inside a single technique, the cook needs to know what to do first. Searing the meat before braising it is not interchangeable with searing it after. Salting the eggplant before frying changes the result. Mounting the butter at the end of the sauce rather than the beginning is a different sauce. Short-form video, 60 seconds, 90 seconds, the loop format, compresses the sequence into a montage in which the what is visible and the when often becomes implicit. A new cook can copy the motions and miss the order. The third is diagnosis. Most viral cooking videos show a successful execution. They do not show the moment where the cook noticed the pan was too hot and recovered, or where the sauce was about to break and was caught. The diagnostic layer, what is happening right now in this pan, and what do I do about it, is the part of cooking that takes the most years to acquire, and the part that algorithmic video most reliably leaves out. A video of a save is hard to compose. A video of a clean success is easy. The platform rewards the second. This is where the failure rescue pillar on this site exists as a deliberate counterweight. 30 common failure patterns drawn from more than 300 recipes, each with its specific fix. None of this is a criticism of creators working inside short-form video. It is a description of what the medium as a medium finds difficult to surface. The 4 eras, 2005 to 2025. The 2-decade arc of online cooking education has phases, and naming them helps see what each phase changed. The food blog era runs from roughly 2005 to 2013. Smitten Kitchen launched in 2006. A generation of independent recipe writers built audiences in long-form prose with food photography. The format was, in retrospect, an inheritor of the magazine recipe column rather than a new thing. A typical post was 800 to 1,500 words. A story, a recipe, a photograph or two. Many of these recipes are still in use 15 years later because the prose carried the why alongside the what. The YouTube era overlaps and extends, running from roughly 2010 to 2018 as the dominant teaching surface. Long-form technique video reached mass audiences for the first time. The Bon Appetit Test Kitchen channel in its 2017 to 2019 peak. Regional cooking channels like Cooking with Dog, Chinese Cooking Demystified, Mangchi. Episodes ran 10 to 25 minutes. There was room for context, for the why, for the moment of failure and recovery. A caption or a swipe up rather than the central artifact. The TikTok cooking era, call it 2020 to the present, completed the compression. 60-second loops, hand-only cameras, often no measurements visible inside the clip. The format made certain kinds of teaching extraordinarily fast. A tortilla fold, a pasta water save, an emulsion technique. It also made certain kinds of teaching almost impossible. The slow build of a braise, the why of a regional substitution, the diagnostic layer above. Each compression was a trade. These 4 eras are not stages on a moral arc. Early was not better, late is not worse. They are 4 different shapes the same project took, each with a particular grain. Before about 2010, a home cook who wanted to learn a technique found it through a teacher, a magazine column, or a recommended cookbook. The recommendation came from a person, a friend, a critic, a librarian, an editor. After about 2020, the same cook finds the technique through a feed shaped in real time by what they have already watched, searched, and lingered on. The recommender is a system, not a person. This is a real change, and it is not the same change as more video, less text. It is a curatorial change. A person recommending a cookbook is making a judgment about what the cook needs to know next. often including things the cook does not yet know to ask for. An algorithm is matching what the cook has already engaged with against what other people who engaged with similar things also engaged with. The two are not equivalent. One can surface the unknown, the other reliably surfaces the adjacent already known. This is observational, not moral. Algorithmic recommendation has done things human recommendation could not. It has surfaced the work of Senegalese, Filipino, Hmong, and Salvadoran home cooks at scales that traditional cookbook publishing systematically underserved. It has connected niche techniques with audiences geographically distant from the practitioner. The algorithm is good at finding the thing many people will engage with from the long tail. What it does less well is surface the foundational thing the cook does not yet know to want. The introduction to reading a pan video is not what most algorithms push to a new account, because it does not produce the engagement signal a more spectacular dish does. The viral sauce clip is. What the algorithm is in cooking terms is a curator with a very specific cost function, optimized for completion rate and rewatch, not for curricular order or skill ladder. That is not a defect. It is the medium's actual job. The cook's job is to know what kind of curator they are working with. What got gained? Some of these have been named in passing. They are worth gathering in one place, because the gain side of this trade has often been left unspoken. Lower language barriers. The Korean grandmother teaching Mandu in the opening is not a fiction. She is a real category of teacher, now reachable by cooks who do not share her language. Mediated by captions, hand tracking, and the visual primacy of the medium. Cuisines underserved by the cookbook publishing system of the late 20th century, Senegalese, Hmong, Hyderabadi, Salvadoran, Uyghur, Ainu, now have direct creator-to-cook channels in a way that simply did not exist in 1995. Lower publishing barriers. A cook with knowledge and no agent, editor, or advance can teach. The structural barrier to being heard is lower than at any point in the cookbook era. This has produced teachers the publishing system would not have selected. Home cooks in rural Mexico, restaurant line workers, second-generation immigrant cooks teaching home and professional cuisines side by side. Mangchi did not get her start through a New York publisher. Cooking with Dog was not commissioned by a network. Accessibility for cooks who struggle with the written word, cooks with dyslexia, with low literacy in the recipe's language, with hearing differences, who benefit from captioned video. The platforms did not set out to serve these cooks. They have served them anyway. These are real gains. Treating them as small is the wrong move. The losses, also real, sit on the other side of the same balance. The why layer is the clearest. A 60-second video shows what the cook is doing. It does not, in 60 seconds, explain why. Sometimes the why is in the caption, sometimes in a pinned comment, sometimes in a follow-up video the cook never watches. A cook who can fold mandu and cannot say why the dough hydration matters has learned half the lesson. The other half is recoverable, but it requires a different surface. The structure layer, named earlier, is the second loss. A cookbook has chapters, a teacher has a syllabus, a feed has neither. A cook learning entirely from algorithmic discovery may, after 2 years of watching, have 100 individual techniques in their hands and no internal map for how those techniques relate. Recovering that map usually means stepping outside the feed and into a different kind of resource. The Atlas of Cooking Systems on this site, Chapter 1 on flavor and seasoning, Chapter 3 on moisture and texture, is one such map. The diagnostic layer, named earlier as well, is the third. When something goes wrong in the pan, the cook needs a way to read what is happening and decide what to do. That reading is hardest to compress into a loop. The failure rescue pillar is the deliberate attempt on this site to give that layer a home. The 30 most common ways everyday cooking goes wrong, and the specific move for each. A fourth loss is slow build time on a single subject. A cookbook chapter on bread trains the cook over hours. A 60-second video trains for 60 seconds. The hour spent with a single thoughtful resource develops a kind of patience the feed does not reward. This is observational. The empirical literature on attention is mixed, and the claim attention spans have declined is contested. What is harder to contest is that different media train different patterns of attention. A fifth loss. A cook learning from individual creators rarely encounters the distinction-driven teaching good cookbook authors built their careers on. The slow naming of what makes a stock and not a broth. A sauté, and not a sear. That kind of teaching by sharp distinction is the work of an essay like this one on stock and broth, and it is hard to compress into a viral loop. The vocabulary of cooking is built on distinctions of that kind. When the dominant medium cannot easily carry the distinction, the vocabulary thins. Both halves of this trade are present at once. The interesting question is whether the medium is figuring out how to carry back the things its early loop form left behind. Bringing back structure inside the new medium? The answer, observably, is yes, slowly in several places at once. Long-form YouTube has not gone away. Kenji Lopez Alt and Helen Rennie published 20 to 40-minute videos that look more like the food blog era essay in audio-visual form than like a TikTok loop. The format trains a different kind of attention than the short-form feed, and the cooks who use it know what it costs and choose it anyway. Paywalled newsletters, Vittles, the Department of Salad, a long list, have rebuilt the food blog era essay as a paid product, with the slow build voice the early blog had before the algorithmic feed pushed everything toward higher engagement. Discord and Substack chat communities have rebuilt the comment section function lost when blog comments became uneconomical to moderate. Individual creators are publishing PDF cookbooks and downloadable recipe collections that work as curricular structure outside the platform feed. This site is an attempt at the same thing. The Atlas of Cooking Systems PDFs, Chapter 1 on flavor and seasoning, and Chapter 3 on moisture and texture, carry the structural layer the feed flattens. The failure rescue pillar carries the diagnostic layer. The timeline of cooking systems carries the historical structure that places any single technique inside the longer arc. The audio library carries the listening as cooking companion layer that text on a screen does not. The two sibling essays in this timeline companion series, on convenience food and the disappearing hour, and on coffee, tea, and chocolate, apply the same trade not fall reading to earlier medium shifts. None of these are arguments against algorithmic video. They are companion layers, sitting next to the feed rather than competing with it. The medium itself is figuring out how to add back what its early forms stripped. The same way the convenience food trade was in motion in the 1980s, when meal kits started selling back some of the texture engineering. The first form of a new medium is rarely the form it eventually settles into. Closing bridge: when you save a video, save the technique to your own kitchen. Watch it 3 or 5 or 10 times. Then put the phone down, then cook the thing. The first attempt will go badly, as first attempts do. This is the moment the medium most reliably leaves you. The thing to do in that moment is read the failure rather than scrub past it. If the sauce broke, what broke first? Heat or emulsion? If the rice stuck, was it the pan, the water level, or the lid? The diagnostic layer lives at failure rescue. The structural layer at the Atlas of Cooking Systems. The historical layer at the timeline of cooking systems. 3 small foundations sit underneath almost any technique a feed will show you. Basic dashi, basic pan sauce, basic French omelette. Each a small structural piece a feed rarely surfaces. The algorithm did not destroy recipe learning. It changed the apprenticeship model, from reading instructions, to watching hands, to learning through algorithmic discovery. And it did so at a scale and a speed nothing in the long history of cooking education had anticipated. The medium taught some things better than text ever did. It left some things for other layers to carry. Both halves are present at once. The cook who reads it as a working trade rather than a verdict, the same way the previous 2 essays in this trilogy, Read Convenience Food and The Arrival of Bitter Drinks, gets the best of what the new medium offers and is not surprised by what it leaves out. The technique you saw at 3 in the morning is wherever you are willing to take it. That has been the only line, across every medium, that stayed true.